you want to leave this place where we grew up, this old town, just put it all behind. Remember you and I would always find somewhere to hide when we were kids, so we could see and hear the water run. The river's gonna cry.
Behind me you see this eternal flame on top of a kind of a pillar that was constructed in 1985. Well, this square was actually dedicated in 1946, right in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. It is a square that is dedicated in memory of all of those who died because of National Socialism. It became one of the very first significant landmarks in Germany that denounced the crimes of the Nazi regime and honored the people who died because of it. And specifically here on this wall, it talks underneath about people who were persecuted because of their political beliefs, because of the color of their skin, because of their religion, their sexual orientation, or any of those different ways in which the Nazis discriminated against specific groups of people.
Where will you go? Won't you miss the ones you know? I'll be here, hanging on, waiting for your call. Seems like time as a wave passing by, leave a mark in our minds to turn to memories. The river's gonna cry when you're gone, 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 gone. The river's gonna cry when you're gone, 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 gone.
So behind me here in Munich is the very famous OdenPlatz, which is the plaza that you see depicted in so many photographs from the rise of National Socialism here in Munich and in Germany. And it was one of the kind of the holy sites, so to speak, to National Socialism. And when you walked through this plaza, you were required to give the Nazi salute. Well, Munich being in the Free State of Bavaria, there were many people here in Munich who did not support the ideology of their government, and they wanted to protest in any way they could, even if it was a silent protest. And so many of them would avoid going through that plaza by taking this alleyway. And it's come down to be known as the Shirkers Alley, because it was the place they would go to avoid having to walk through the plaza and give the Nazi salute. And to this day, it is marked to show that this is the place where those protesters would walk with this golden pathway of the bricks. So now here in OdenPlatz, I can't quite go up there, unlike the tourists who are climbing on things. But there's a very famous photograph that was taken in 1914 showing a crowd that had gathered right here in this plaza. And the photo was taken from just above me and to the left, showing the crowd hearing the announcement that Munich was now a part of the war, the Great War. And years later, a photograph was published when Hitler had risen to power, showing Adolf Hitler in the crowd cheering on the march to war. It's almost certainly a forgery and was done to show some form of propaganda. He was almost certainly, if he was in the crowd, he certainly wasn't that visible in the photo. But this is where that photo was taken from, generally in this area just above me and a little bit to the left. All over the city of Munich, you'll see evidence of buildings that used to be much older. So this one, for example, was built in 1819, but of course, like most of the city of Munich, was destroyed during the Second World War and reconstructed, in this case, this building in 1950. And that's true over and over and over again in this city. So much of the city was destroyed and had to be rebuilt in the aftermath of the Second World War. So now we are very near to KunigPlatz here in Munich, and behind me you see the foundation, which is all that remains of one of the honor temples that was here in Munich. It was set up in 1935 by the Nazi regime in honor of the blood witnesses, as they called them, the 16 members of the beer hall push of the early 1920s that kind of became symbolic martyrs of National Socialism. Of course, we're not even entirely sure if one of them was part of the beer hall push, but they needed 16, and so there was one that they chose that they thought maybe was killed, who was a Nazi, instead of just being killed in the crossfire by accident. But there were 2 honor temples. Each one had the tombs of 8 of these bodies, and this is one. There's another. They left them as ruins. They left them as a symbol of the destruction of Nazism. It was in 1947 that the U.S. Army actually destroyed these honor temples. And it's interesting then that right next door is this museum, which is actually the underground archives of the Warsaw ghettos. So there's a lot of that symbolism here in Bavaria, where in the sites that were associated with the worst of humanity, you see sites honoring those who were victims of them in the first place. It's quite dramatic. So we're now in an area known as KunigPlatz, and there's this tall obelisk here, and then we see down the street over to where KunigPlatz is. And this area between here and there on these streets, on either side of the street, this is where the Nazi Party had its administrative buildings for Munich and for Bavaria. And there were 2 different men who were the administrators of Bavaria during the Nazi regime. And the second one of those men was a man named Paul Geisler, who took over as minister president of Bavaria in November of 1942 and led it nearly to the end of the Second World War. He led it until the 28th of April 1945. He then took over as Reichsminister of the Interior very briefly for about a week before the surrender of Nazi Germany. By that point, he and his wife and children had gone to Berchtesgaden, where he and his wife took their own lives, and of course took the lives of their children, very sadly as well. We're now outside of the city of Munich, and we're visiting the Nurg Palace. It was completed, the initial phase of the palace was completed in 1679, and it was the summer residence of the rulers of Bavaria from the House of Wittelsbach, right up through the last kings of Bavaria. So we're going to look around a little bit. We've got a few hours before the place closes. Okay, so it's been quite a full first day of the tour. We had dinner last night, but today was the first full day. And been a lot of different sites, which you will have seen in the videos. But now we're doing the very touristy thing, and we're all headed over to the Hofbrauhaus. So I think most of us are going to be there, and we're also going to be doing some meetups with some folks who are not part of the tour, but live in the Munich area and wanted to come and say hi, so we'll check them out too.
Prost. That's usually me. There you go.